my name is Vivian Sturt. I was born in 1946 in Wokingham in Berkshire.
You were born in 1946, so just after the war. What are your memories of those sort of post-war years?
Just that, really, I just took it for granted that, there were food shortages and that everything was rationed still, obviously until the early 50s or middle 50s. So I remember ration books with coupons, but it was all I knew, really, so I didn't take it as being particularly unusual. And, you would mix butter and marge together to make the butter go a bit further and things like that. A field opposite us, which in fact belonged to the people who had given us the pony. And it had a huge hole in the middle of it. And it was really not far from the house at all. And I just, this big hole was there. I never realised that such a dramatic happening had caused it, and that obviously I should think it had shaken the house, and how frightening it must have been for my mother.
And for you, you described your upbringing as idyllic. Tell me why you think it was so idyllic.
Well, because I loved being outside, and there were lots of trees to climb. I was a bit of a tomboy, and I had a friend up the road who lived on a farm who had lots of ponies. And also, it was so much safer, and we didn't have distractions. We made our own games and played. And it was the times of, you had one phone call, in one telephone in the draftiest bit of the house by the front door. And to make a phone call, you had to sort of book in with your parents when you could make a call. So it was quite austere almost, but as I say, it was all I knew, so I just took it for granted.
And those days of just being out in the summer all day, you compare and contrast that with maybe younger people today. What are your thoughts about spending all day out?
Well, it was just lovely, and because it was a working farm, so we'd help the cowman and we'd help feed calves and things like that. It was just a really lovely experience. And there was no thought of sun cream or, worrying about you you got brown. You didn't seem to burn in those days. When I was older, I had a better fitting hat, but, when you were little, the hat came off before you hit the ground. So that was if you were wearing a riding hat. It was a bit like, the Queen, bless her, she still rides in a headscarf. And always has done, because, riding, you just didn't wear riding hats. It was considered almost a sissy to wear a riding hat, which is absolutely ridiculous.
And tell me about when you first realised your love of horses. If you could just take me back there and tell me what age you were and why you feel that you fell in love with horses.
A bit because my middle sister had ridden, and she helped me ride on the old pony we were given, and I just naturally loved them. If I heard horses out on the road, I'd run up our drive and climb up a tree and sit in the tree and watch people ride underneath me. It was just magic, and every penny was spent on a pony book to read or picture of horses. It was just something that was completely natural, and it just got stronger and stronger as I got older, as I got more knowledgeable. But I remember we didn't have a saddle, so it was a case of you had to have a really firm seat and good balance. And it was my sister who did the initial, and it was very much knees in and heels down. And it's surprising, actually, if your heels are down, everything falls into place because you're sitting upright and you're down in the saddle. Because the first thing when you fall off is your toes go down. So, it was just the basics I was given, and once you've got those basics, you can go on from there. And then at the riding school where I helped out, I got lessons there, and I just picked everything up as I went along, really. Right from an early age, though I didn't have a rocking horse as such, we had a sort of it was like a black poof on four legs that you could sit astride, and I used to spend hours sitting on that with sort of reins attached to the chair in front and pretend I was galloping and jumping. And then when I got my first pair of jompers, it was just such a treat. And they were those thick sort of webbing ones with great big baggy bits on the side. I can't remember what you call them, but, well, jumper size. But it was just, everything was just so exciting about horses, and it was just a total devotion. But in those days, we hacked everywhere, and very few people had horse boxes. And if you went to a local show and there was a horse box there, it was really a big deal. Whereas now everybody's got trailers and horse boxes, and they're, actually horse boxes you can live in.
And what are your sort of fondest memories of those shows back then, Vivian, in the 50s and 60s?
It was really the friendship, because we all used to... There was a gang of about 6 of us that used to work at weekends, and then we'd go to shows together on our allotted ponies. And it was just really good fun, and I think I was a bit competitive, so I quite enjoyed the competitive side of it. The main thing I loved was cantering around the arena when people clapped. I thought that was great. Sometimes the jumping classes, you might win £3 as first prize, which was a lot. But no, it was just it was wonderfully rewarding.
For you, when did you decide that horses and moving forward in what you wanted to do in terms of a job, a career, when did that sort of seed was planted, and then what did you go on to do?
Quite early on, really. My middle sister had been quite academic, and she did quite well at school, far more academic than me. But I was always, said you've got to have a good grounding and work hard and get your GCSEs, or O-levels as they were in those days. But I would think about 14, I'd already decided that I was going to have a career in horses. And, where the riding school where I'd helped out, it was a change of ownership, and the new owner offered me a job. And from there on, I was working with horses, either training riders or schooling horses, young horses, and then maybe selling them on or competing with them. I realised that so many horses misbehave, and I always remember being told that a misbehaving horse is a luxury you just can't afford. And so I always, very gently, was one step ahead of them, so always stopped any trouble before it happened. And it was just completely natural to me, and that, I could take... I know people don't agree with hunting now, but we used to go hunting, and everybody was rather amazed that a horse I would take out that had never been hunting before would always just behave. And I think once I realised I wasn't going to be an international show jumper, I got great satisfaction of just training horses for other people to go on with.
And I know that you also loved to teach people to ride, and so if you could kind of tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I always felt it was terribly important for children to be confident. And I realised very early on that if a child was frightened, they'd say to their parents they didn't want to come riding, and I wouldn't get that 7 and 6 an hour, or whatever, 5 shillings an hour, whatever I got. So I was always very good at spotting fear in children and sort of getting to the bottom of it before it really developed into a fear where they would say they didn't want to ride anymore. Because it can be pretty scary for little children, and especially falling off and things like that. So I always made sure that they were looked after and they were confident, which is the most important thing.
Are there any horses that are sort of more special to you for whatever reason than maybe others?
Yes, there was she grew to about 15.3, so that's a small horse, but she was a very beautiful bay, and I had her right from coming over from Ireland as a 3-year-old, and she just had a phenomenal jump. And I just loved her to bits, and she'd do all sorts of things for me, and I had her quite well schooled on the ground. And she was a really lovely mare, and then I stupidly decided I wanted something bigger and sold her, and I still regret it to this day. Her name was Little Game, and she was ridden in grade A classes and international classes by Jonathan Dimbleby, who used to ride.
And you still think about her now?
Yes, I do. Oh, I still wake up and remember going to the yard where she was and literally not being able to look over the box and coming away and sobbing as I left 2 or 3 years later. She was very special.
If I could go back to your family, we talked about your sort of first family holidays and your dad driving you, having a car, which was again quite unusual, and driving you to Hayling Island and the swimming and staying there, and also just how you described it as blissful. So if you could sort of just tell me a little bit about that, those family holidays.
Well, it was just so exciting because really we only did short car journeys. And then, obviously, then my father worked all the time. He would drive us there, leave us there, and just packing up. The only thing was I was a bit car sick, and they never thought to sit me in the front, so I used to sit in the back and be sick. But it was just so exciting going on a long journey. And then, whether it was in a caravan or a B&B, it was always on the beach near the sea. And it was just magical. I mean, it's a bit like today's people going, to an exotic foreign country. It felt exotic, and I loved swimming, and I loved the sea, and the rock pools, and it was just such an exciting thing. And fish and chips in the evening, that was rather delicious. And the weather just seemed to be fine. I mean, I suppose you're looking back through rose-tinted glasses. But it always seemed to be sunny when we were away. And we just didn't go out to eat much. I mean, our biggest treat was to go to the Cadina in Reading and have sardines on toast, which was very special. And always a big treat if Dad finished work early and it was a nice evening, he and Ma would go to a pub and they'd go in and have a drink, and we'd have a lemonade and a packet of crisps in the car. And, of course, the crisps were just quite new then and very special. It was called Crimpy Crisps. They then became Smiths. They had a big factory. First crisps were in Reading and Winnish, which was quite near where we lived in Wokingham. So little packets of crisps with, those twists of blue paper with salt you sprinkled on. Gosh, I still to this day can't bear flavoured chips, crisps.
Tell me a little bit about visiting your friend, and it was obviously she had a very privileged life, and you had a glimpse into that privilege.
Yes. One of my best friends at the little school I went to across the road was Ginny Marling, and her father was a sir and quite grand, and came related to some very aristocratic families. But they were charming people, and they were really pleased that I was such a good friend to their daughter, and that I could help with the ponies and be company. And they very much treated me as family almost, and it was a great treat to be invited to stay for supper in the evenings when they had, they'd have guests, and I'd be sitting there and people would speak to me, and I learned how to, not be shy and be brave and speak back politely. And it was, it made me more confident. It was just lovely fun to ride out with her, and we'd decide which ponies we were going to ride. And then somebody at the farm would pack us up a picnic lunch and maybe a picnic tea as well. And the farm was quite big. So, for us, you could ride round almost half a day and and then it bordered a railway line, one of the fields. And we used to always have our picnic by the railway line, and then wave to the trains that were obviously steam trains, belching out smoke, wave to the people on the trains, and that was great fun for us. And then we used to come out on the road, and we could ride up. And then if you went up Luckley Lane, it was quite safe. There wasn't nearly so many cars. And they weren't they weren't fast cars, so it was much safer for children to ride on the roads than it is now. And as I say, you had to make your own fun. You didn't have the temptation of being glued to a phone or a tablet or computer. I find these computer games are really scary, and it just encourages violence, I think.
Mm. Tell me why you decided to give up horse riding.
Well, mainly my husband's work has always been in property, and he very much was the sort of person that lived for today. And so we were very exposed when there were downturns in the property market. And also, my husband for the last 20 years has had really bad health. So I've sort of spent my time visiting hospitals and fighting for treatment for him. And, I still am his carer now. So it's... and also, I did have it was jumping. It wasn't the fact it was my fault, but I'd have a fall at a jump, and then be completely knocked out or concussed several times, which wasn't good, really.
Although you haven't ridden for 10 years, Vivian, do you still have that passion and love for horses?
Oh, yes, and I can live through, I've got two, the younger grandchildren. I've been teaching that, now go on and ride. I don't see them very often now, because we've been, because of my husband's health and because I've got this dust thing in my chest, we've sort of self-isolated, so I haven't seen so much of the family. But I have taught all the grandchildren to ride. Most of them have sort of given up, but they still could sit on a horse and ride, which I found very rewarding and really enjoy.
And we've been in these strange times for over 5 months now. Can you tell me how you and your husband Andrew have been affected by COVID-19?
Well, we really have been very lucky in that, the village where we live has had a good community group that straight away helped with prescriptions and food deliveries. And, we've had constant FaceTime and WhatsApp communication with all the family. So we've been very lucky, but I have worried hugely about children who must have suffered hugely by not having, lots of space and, the diversion of going to school. And I've felt really worried about the exams for the older ones. It must have been so difficult for them. Well, it is difficult for them.
So you moved to Dorset, Bourton, which is North Dorset on the border. Tell me why you love where you live and what it is about Bourton that you love so much.
Bourton is just, though we've got the noise of the 303, geographically it's ideal. And other than the daughter that's in New Zealand, we're within 2 hours of all the others. So geographically, it's great for visiting and transport. Though, as I say, we do suffer from a bit of noise. But it's just quite a friendly. It's not a fashionable village, and there's people, families that have lived in Bourton all their life, which I think is quite special. There's not many villages where that can happen. And it's just that people everybody seems to get on. Or, there's no great snobbery in the village, which is what we like.
Can you tell me why you feel it's important to preserve memories?
Well, I just think it is, because otherwise, and there's very sadly, there's so little writing now. Everything is sort of done, even photographs you don't have, everything is on an iPad or a phone. And so, you've got to have memories. And this sounds a bit political, but I think, remembering about people who made money out of slaves, it was a fact of life and part of our history. I know it was wrong, but so many people did and didn't think twice about it. And I think, to learn that happened isn't a bad thing. And I don't think you can erase happenings like that. And just, to let modern children know that there was life before, the mobile phone or the gaming machine.
So, Vivian, why did you want to tell me your memories today?
Well, I've always been a great admirer of Trevor Bailey, who is one of the instigators of this, and just have enjoyed so much his old films, and just seen, farmers who are very elderly now in their younger days on their old tractors and how they farmed, and how horses used to be delivered by train, which absolutely fascinated me into Gillingham station on one of these films. And I just thought, if I could add anything or help, it would be good.